RSI's Angela Hogaboom joins us this week to share her insights on news from Datto, Cytracom, and Barracuda. Plus, we break down some interesting data from Datto's 2021 State of the Msp Report with their very own Senior VP of Business Development, Rob Ray. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 199, Self-Addressed Stamped Security. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode 199. My name is Matt Whitlock, Technology Editor, Online Director, and your host of this fine program for you. And if you've listened before and I talk about you, I'm not talking about you specifically, like, hey, you're, Bob or Sally, but we're talking about folks like you, which means like VARs, MSPs, IT integrators, IT consultants, folks like you who do things with technology, integrate technology into other businesses and monitor it and help them secure it and all of those types of those types of things. So if that is you, you are in the right place. You are going to get a lot out of this particular episode. I guarantee it. And I'm going to tell you why here in just a moment. But first and foremost, joining me this week and most weeks is the man of the hour, the man who makes the trains run on time here at ChannelPro, Executive Editor Rich Freeman. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Matt. And I'll just say, as somebody who works in the media industry, I think we made the right choice by not targeting this podcast just at Sally, because that's an audience of one. Where's the show going to go? A broader focus was a good decision on our part.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, if we had gone to that specific of a niche, the individual human being niche, like the podcast for Sally, we probably wouldn't have reached very many people. But if I was going to target anybody, Rich, with a podcast of their very own, I could think of no one better than our guest host today. I'm so excited she's back on with us. She is a cybersecurity advisor, a cloud strategist. She's a digital transformation expert driven by a passage, Rich. She's got a couple of those in there as well, but mostly it's a passion for implementing new technology in an ethical fashion. She's also the philanthropy co-chair of the Cloud Girls, a group devoted to helping women pursue careers in cybersecurity and STEM fields. Please welcome the Director of Risk Assessment and Innovation at RSI, Angela Hogaboom. Welcome back.
Hey guys, good to be here.
It is great to have you joining us again. I always love it and enjoy it when you're on. And I'm not lying. I would make a podcast just for you because
I think you should. I would listen to that. I would definitely listen every week.
That's a market we could own. We would have 100%
captive audience.
I love it so much. That's good stuff. So, you've been on with us before, but we've got a lot of new listeners, a lot of new viewers since then. If you can take a couple of minutes, tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Sure. Angela Hogaboom. I'm the Director of Assessment and Innovation for Renaissance Systems, or RSI, down in Austin, Texas, though I'm based here in Broomfield, Colorado, just outside of Denver. I specialize in cybersecurity assessment, and that is anything from compliance frameworks to architecture frameworks. These days, doing a lot of cloud assessments, a lot of configuration assessments and things like that. My job is basically to answer the big question that so many companies have, and that is, how are we doing? How secure are we? How are we doing? And, what do we need to do better? So that I've been in this role for about 1.5 years now, formally in this company, but I've got a 10-year background in cloud strategy and IT consulting. So been around the block a few times on the cloud and security stuff.
So tell us a little bit more about that background, because you said you started as a consultant at one point. What were you doing? What was your path to progression to get into?
It's funny. I started as the compliance officer at a salon franchise. It's no longer, it doesn't exist anymore. But I had a boss who got in a little bit of trouble and had to shut down operations for a little while and work with an attorney on getting all the stuff organized. He was a serial entrepreneur. He had all these businesses, and everybody else was really, really busy and intimidated by the legal department. And I stepped in and said, okay, I can help with this. And from there, I really developed this, just kind of this astuteness for detail in contracts and, provisions and terms and conditions and all of those things. Ultimately, when I left there, I started working for it was a cloud computing company, but I was the executive assistant to the CEO for a couple of years. And I worked with them to develop kind of a marketing strategy for their hosted phone system, because all of the salespeople were still selling PBXs and didn't quite, they didn't quite have the knowledge gap there, or the knowledge awareness there of the platform that you would use to program a phone or to configure your find me, follow me, or things like that. And that was something I knew how to do, even though I didn't know the back end technology. So that just kind of, my education just kind of grew. I went from there to being a channel manager. And part of the challenge at the time, it's so cool that we've been talking to, we have Datto on the line with us today, because I do remember earlier days of Datto and backup and all of those cloud technologies that were coming into play. But my job was to kind of build some awareness campaigns for our resellers and for our channel partners. And I had a weekly webinar series on, sometimes it was on a tech, sometimes it was on sales, sometimes it was on marketing. And after some time of that, I said, I'm going to go give this a shot, to go try to do this on my own. And I had a successful consultancy for some years there. And I was actually, right around COVID time when, budgets were starting to change, and the retainers for consultants like me needed to be shifted to babysitters in the house, or there were just a lot of changes that happened. And I was lucky enough to be able to, that I had been working with some MSPs and some different teams, and was able to solidify my role in a different company. So I've been kind of all over the place. And now I focus solely on cybersecurity compliance and frameworks. I'm also a student. I went back to school. That was my big COVID motivator, was to go back to school and get my degree. So I'm about halfway through my cybersecurity bachelor's degree right now, and filling in those technology gaps. Things I didn't know, learning how to pen test right now, which is it's a lot more fun than I really thought it was going to be. So yeah, I've had quite a journey.
Definitely so. I think you made the right choice career-wise, not trying to follow the budget into home babysitting. There's really not a lot of growth after that. That is lucrative.
Yeah.
So, well, awesome stuff. Well, I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really glad you're back on to join us. We got a lot we're going to cover today, and we're already, I think, running a little long. So we're gonna highlight what we got coming up, and it's super exciting stuff. We're gonna talk a little bit about Datto. In fact, later on, we're gonna have an interview with Rob Ray from Datto. He's gonna be here to talk about their 2021 State of the Msp Report, which is gonna be a really exciting conversation. But they're gonna talk about Datto. We're gonna talk about Cytracom. We're gonna talk about Barracuda, and we've got a couple other things that we're gonna touch on. So it's gonna be a great episode. Let's go ahead, Rich, and dive in to the news. Datto's shipping something. I mean, they're always shipping something, but so this is something that might be interesting.
Well, this is kind of a big deal for them, certainly, and it's sort of an interesting sign of the times for managed services. So this week, they shipped the first edition of their continuity solution for Microsoft Azure. And they kind of told the world back in March they were working on this. It is available now in the English-speaking countries around the world. They're calling this an early adopter release, but I mean, it's a full-blown general availability product if you're in the US and Canada. This is not their first cloud backup solution. They've been doing cloud backup for software as a service for quite a while right now, but this is their first infrastructure as a service cloud backup solution. Now, if you are a Microsoft Azure user or reseller, you're probably aware of the fact that Microsoft has its own backup product for Azure Site Recovery. What Datto says, though, is that that's all well and good for certain use cases, but their product is 100% focused to the MSP. So multi-tenant management interface, and not just any multi-tenant management interface. If you're a Datto partner, it's the same management interface that you use to manage the on-premises appliances and everything else that you sell from Datto. Set up for very easy implementation and very easy backup. So they are saying that you can onboard a client in 3 clicks. It'll be ready. It'll start backing up that client inside of 15 minutes. Once it's up and running, it will continue to back up that environment every 60 minutes, once an hour. So your recovery point objective is never going to be more than 60 minutes. It is equipped to virtualize a workload that has become unavailable in Microsoft Azure itself. But of course, if the problem is that Azure is down, then being able to recover into Azure isn't going to get the job done. So it will also sort of fail over to Datto's own cloud if Azure is unavailable for that virtualization environment. Security features built in include cloud deletion defense, which is something that Datto added sometime back for their on-premises systems. And the idea basically is they're kind of hiding some snapshots of end user environment someplace where bad guys can't see it. It's sort of air gapped off from the internet. And so if a backup is deleted by an attacker or just clumsiness or whatever, there is this sort of backup to the backup that you can get from Datto that is included with this technology. Again, MSP friendly. It's priced at per terabyte per month rates. You can choose, there are different kind of blocks you can choose from in terms of the number of terabytes that you're paying for. But the idea is that they want this to be as predictable, the pricing to be as predictable as possible for the MSP, so that you're not in one of these cloud zones that listeners are probably familiar with, where you're constantly trying to gauge how much consumption you're going to be paying for and how to optimize that. You buy a block of terabytes, you're going to know exactly what you're going to be paying for that every month. You can, resell it at predictable rates as a result. And there are no egress charges, by the way, for getting data out of the system, which is different from the way things work sometimes. So from a Datto, if you're a Datto partner, or even just, from Datto's perspective itself, they've obviously been doing on-prem BDR for a long time. Like I said, they've been doing software as a service backup for quite a number of years, really, at this point. And now they're doing infrastructure as a service backup as well. And the fact that they saw the need to invest in that and roll out a product that does that shows further illustrates the increasing importance of cloud out there in the market right now, and the degree to which workloads are continually moving from on-prem into the cloud.
So, Angela, super important you have backups, right? Super important. You have backups of the backups, right? Now, it's also, do you also think it's super important to have backups of the backed up backup, or should you back up the backed up backups backup?
That's actually, it's funny because that's a conversation, literally, that is a conversation that I've been having with a number of different clients. And that is, we're backed up to the cloud. We're good. We don't have to do the 3-2-1 anymore. We're good. Well, I think that, in the last 6 or 9 months, we've kind of seen some cases where that's not exactly true. So backups and backups of the backup, and then maybe a backup of a backup of a backup that is provisioned out for a longer period of time, right? So if you have a threat actor that's living in your environment and it's been backed up in your environment, you want to be able to get to something that's clean. Yeah, you still, there still is that strategy. So I actually really like this, this build and this approach, because you can have your cake and eat it too. So you can have your Azure super cloud, right? You can have your Azure super cloud backup, and then you've got you can have the Datto at the same time that's providing this extra layer of security. And that's, that's kind of the golden state. That's where you want to be.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty robust solution. It's also funny when we talk about backups too, because you got to think about not only just having the backup is not good enough anymore. Like, you have to think about where it lives, right? And is it accessible online? And we've joked around on the show before, like everyone should just back everything up to 3.5-inch floppy disks, because those are
feels like it. That's what it feels like now. It's like that. What's that dance where you go forward and backward, the 2-step, right? So it's like, we were like, okay, yeah, we're all going to the cloud, and then it's like, okay, no, now we're going to go back on prem, and it's like, no, so let's do a little more cloud and let's do a little more on prem, and yeah, it's really funny the way that I just think of over the last 10 years, how the backup conversation has changed, and it changes and then it goes back, and then it changes and then it goes back. And so everybody's
dusting off those old tape, everyone's dusting off those old tape drives.
Yeah, I'm like, I wonder if we have a tape drive around here, or even, somebody on one of my calls earlier this week was saying that they do have a legacy tape drive sitting in a closet just in case. Right?
Go ahead, hacker, get at that. I'm telling you, ain't gonna happen. Certainly something said to that. Now, Rich, a couple of questions that I was going to read here. So clearly, so this works with Azure. I have to imagine, is there no AWS support, or do we expect that will be coming at some point?
I asked about that, and I asked about AWS and Google. Is that on the roadmap or whatever? And the answer basically was no. I mean, there is enormous Azure adoption and usage among their partners, not as much AWS and Google. So, essentially what they said is we are always open to that, and if we hear from enough partners that they need that, they want that, then we would get to work creating that product for them. But as of right now, it's Azure only.
Okay, and on the pricing, I know you said there's no egress charges, and you pay per terabyte. You said that, but it will fail over into Datto's cloud. If a workload fails over into Datto's cloud, if Azure is unavailable, are there additional charges to run it in their cloud, or does it just run there until Azure becomes available, and that's just part of the cost?
As far as I know, it's the latter. This is just an included feature. If you need to run something in their cloud for a little while until availability is restored, you can just do that without having to pay storage charges.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe you should also ensure that Azure always fails, so that way you can just use Datto's cloud for free all the time. So that'd be kind of fun. I think eventually they'd catch on to that, though. Angela.
I think that would be a short term, long-term strategy.
You got to work the systems, Angela. That's how it goes.
You do. Yeah, you do.
Isn't that Datto guy? Yeah, there's a workload that failed over 8 months ago. It's still running. What the heck?
We're just waiting for it to come back up.
Right. I don't know. You got to talk to the Microsoft people. It's their problem.
You could say awesome. hang out on hold with Microsoft for as long as the Microsoft holds last.
Right. We've escalated that ticket to level 44 support. So instead of India, I should be able to talk to somebody in Ireland soon. That might be nice.
Yeah, Siberia.
Oh, good stuff. All right, Rich. So cool stuff here, folks. We're going to touch on some of these news stories. There's always a lot more information that's in these. And so we always make sure that we put the links to these stories and the things that we talk about in the show notes for the episode. So if you're an audio listener, welcome. Great to be in your head right now. But if you want to go and read more of these, go to channelpronetwork.com, find the show sheet for episode 199, and the links are in there. Depending on which player you use to, you might just be able to open the description area in your app, in your player, and you can go right to the links from your phone or whatever. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello everybody. Go to the description area at the top, open up that box, and you'll find all the links there, so you can kind of go read along and get all the details. Where you also find some details like on the next story. So Cytracom has acquired somebody. I don't remember Cytracom acquiring a whole lot of companies, right? So this might be new. This is probably why it's newsworthy. Kudos to you for figuring that out.
You're right, and we can kind of touch on that a little bit later on. Acquisitions have not historically been a big part of the strategy at Cytracom, and we can even talk about why that is. But as we're recording this, 3 hours ago, the news broke that Cytracom has bought a company called OmniNet. Now, OmniNet, that's a name the company adopted in 2017. They were doing business before that under the name My Digital Shield. I think a lot of people who are listening or watching right now are probably familiar with the company under one of those two names. It is a business that makes a cloud-based unified threat management. So essentially a cloud-based firewall product and a cloud-based software-defined wide area networking product. And they say you use these two things together, and what you get is optimized, clean internet. Big, broad brushstrokes. OmniNet is in the security and connectivity business for the age of cloud computing. This is not on the face of it what Cytracom does. Cytracom is in unified communications and VoIP. Why are they buying a security and connectivity company? So 2 reasons. First of all, one of the things that they have discovered, looking at data about the calls that come into their technical support organization is that a lot of them have to do with networking and security. And so if you are in the VoIP market, if you're doing UCaaS, like it or not, networking and security are going to be part of what you deal with. And they really felt like they could simplify things enormously for their partners if they actually owned a networking and security company. And so just right out of the gate, effective, today, there is integration between the voice platform from Cytracom and the SASE secure, help me out, Angela. What does SASE stand for? Secure something?
Secure Access Service Edge.
There you go. That's what that's like the shortest shorthand for what OmniNet does. There's integration between that system and between the Cytracom system, such that the OmniNet system will recognize Cytracom traffic. It will automatically prioritize it and secure it. And so all of this kind of firewall level configuration that VoIP resellers have to deal with typically to get the thing to work right, none of that anymore. You don't have to worry about that. Cytracom and OmniNet have essentially taken care of that for you behind the scenes. So that right there is sort of reason enough for Cytracom to buy OmniNet, that they can kind of solve this time-consuming, expensive headache for MSPs. But, another thing that the OmniNet product does, or another headache really that it solves, is the whole work from home security headache. So, in the old days, a firewall was a device. It was in the office. As long as you were working in the office, you were behind the firewall. Everything was safe. Now everyone's working from home. So how do you secure all those remote workers? And because this OmniNet product is based in the cloud, essentially that, the perimeter is wherever you need it to be. It encompasses the office, but it encompasses all of those work from home, remote work locations as well. So from Cytracom's standpoint, this both helps them, helps make their VoIP product better, but it also kind of moves them into an entirely new market that, at least initially will be focused around work from home, networking, and security. So they are becoming more than just a voice vendor through this acquisition.
You know what else SaaS stands for, Rich?
I'm sorry, what stands for?
Do you know what else SASE stands for?
No.
Self-addressed stamped envelope. That's what I actually thought you were talking about. I thought we were going back to mailing things again.
Yeah, I'm sure they checked that out at Cytracom before inking this deal. Wait a minute, you mean to tell me we just paid millions of dollars for an envelope?
But that's a secure and safe way to get things around. Who doesn't trust the post office these days? Lots of stuff in there, Angela. So, Richard, let's touch on it real quick, and Angela, I'll get your thoughts. If there's anything in here that you find interesting. But historically, Cytracom has not been a company that's kind of grown through acquisition. They generally do most of the things that they do in house, and they come with their own solutions and their own technologies. Is this a new byproduct of kind of being owned by private investment now, or at least partly owned by private investment? What do you think?
I think a little bit. I mean, they were apparently working on this problem, the connectivity security problem, on their own. And the way they described it to me basically is when they became, familiar with OmniNet and the OmniNet product, they realized that they could accelerate the work that they were doing in-house pretty significantly by acquiring this intellectual property and the people who had created it. So they're not, walking away from that historical commitment to developing things in-house, which they do and have always done because they have a very particular point of view on how things should work. They feel like they have a very strong understanding of the MSP market and what MSPs need. And obviously, if you build everything in-house, you can make it exactly what you want it to be. But in this case, they saw an opportunity to kind of jumpstart things a little bit by acquiring this company.
And now, Angela, you've got a lot of experience, as you mentioned, in kind of like phones and doing this kind of stuff. Is this an important problem to solve, especially these days with so many remote workers? Is this the right way to solve it?
It is. And I think that, equivalent to the security component of this kind of architecture is the quality of communications. How many how many hours a day do we spend on Zoom or in Teams meetings, or, just having to communicate over the internet, whether it's in your office or at your home. That has actually been a challenge. I mean, at my house, I have 2 separate circuits, and I'll get the Skylink here eventually when it's available for my area. But we have to have devices that will load balance and help balance out that network traffic so that I can be on the phone at the same time as my husband, who is, downstairs doing almost the same job. Right. And then, the kids playing the video games or, whatever else it is that they're doing. So I think this addresses a critical quality and availability concern as much as it does a security concern. And I'm always a proponent of don't recreate the wheel. Somebody has created something that is solving the problem that you have. Find a way to integrate, or, in this case, they're very fortunate that they were able to, they're in a position to go buy it and it works, right out of the gate. So very smart move.
Excellent. Well, you've heard it here, folks. Smart move. Go and check that out of what Cytracom is doing. But Cytracom is not the only one that's kind of messing around with self-addressed stamped envelopes in this particular week. Barracuda is doing the same thing. So expect some nice new mailers from them, pre-made paper in your Rich. What's Barracuda doing?
Barracuda is doing a bunch of different things, in fact. So you're right, SASE is part of it, but there are actually 2 other things. I mean, any one of these items actually this week would have, probably made it onto the podcast, but they did, they announced 3 things all on the same day. So one of which is they have kind of formally launched what they're calling a SASE platform. They basically took 4 existing products, and now they have those working together in a way that they feel like they are in the SASE market too, like a lot of their competitors. And so that's their Content Shield product, their Cloud Gen Access product, their Cloud Gen WAN, wide area networking product, and their Cloud Gen Firewall. Those are the components of their SASE platform. They made some tweaks to those products. So, I mean, there are other vendors who are delivering SASE solutions right now. What's the differentiation for Barracuda? And the thing that they like to emphasize is the sort of the comprehensiveness of it and the flexibility of it. So that basically there are a lot of SASE products out there that run exclusively in the cloud. They will let you run this platform in the cloud or on-prem or any combination thereof. And so they added some cloud functionality to their Cloud Gen Firewall product to add that flexibility. They added some on-prem functionality to their Cloud Gen Access, which is their zero-touch networking access product, so that it too could be both cloud and on-prem. But basically, this is their step into a market that, for the reasons we just discussed, because of work from home, everything, SASE is now a big deal in security, and Barracuda has an answer for its partners and its customers right now, involving these products that they've been working on. So that's item number 1. Item number 2, they took a product called Total Email Protection, an email security solution, and they have essentially upgraded the incident response functionality in that system. So in the past, there was functionality in there that would allow you to conduct a search and take an action on the results. So if, for example, the system found an infected attachment in somebody's email, you could tell it to go find that attachment in other messages, and if you find it, delete it or quarantine it or something like that. But it was basically, you could give it one instruction, go do this one thing, and then if you get a positive result, do this one other thing, and that's all you could do. And what they have done is create a graphical drag and drop tool, like a workflow engine, they're calling it, that allows you to define more complex conditions and actions, and to define responses, multiple responses as well. So maybe instead of just looking for that attachment, you're going to look for that attachment in users who work in this office or that office, or who have this title. And if you find something, you're going to both quarantine that message and send an alert to a technician. So more sophisticated, flexible functionality to kind of take advantage of the incident response functionality in total email protection. And then last but not least, they have an all new product here that they are calling Data Inspector. And basically what Data Inspector does, it will go off into your Microsoft SharePoint or OneDrive repositories, and it will find basically it'll find what you're telling it to look for, but it's designed to look for sensitive information. So that could be PII, that could be user credentials, it could be credit card data, or anything else really that you define. It comes with over 130 sort of specific definitions already built into the product for things like driver's licenses and driver's license numbers and passport numbers, but you can create custom things for it to watch out for as well. It has optical character recognition functionality, so it's not just looking for text. It can inspect images and graphics and so on as well. And there is some response functionality as well. So you first and foremost, you're going to get a report that is going to give you a reasonably comprehensive understanding of what you have out there that is potentially at risk. But then there are certain things that you can do in response to that knowledge on an automated basis. If you find stuff that shouldn't be out there, for example, you can move it aside or delete it or whatever. There is some automated response capability in there too.
That's a lot to dive into, Rich.
Yes,
so Angela, I'm really glad we have like kind of a security kind of expert with us to kind of help break some of this stuff down, because there's a lot to digest. So Angela, the first thing I think I want to ask you is it seems to me that it makes a lot of sense that to make these platforms certainly more comprehensive when it comes to a security perspective, but also I'm seeing a big trend towards security automation, right? Like being able to take an action, but then deploy an action kind of automatically across everything. It seems like the only way we're going to scale security is to kind of have security be smarter.
That's really true. And even when I'm doing assessments, I'm never looking for a yes or no answer. I'm looking for a maturity-based answer. And the highest point of that maturity is how automated is this system? And then backed by how much documentation do you have on your process for this system? So I think that there are a lot of technologies to pick from now. And, what I really love is that we're talking about data. MSPs are finally talking about data and what is actually in those repositories. So, for so long it was, let's keep them out of the firewall. Let's keep them out of the workstations. Let's keep them out of this or that. And now there are finally bigger conversations happening about, hey, what's going on? What's transferring in email? What's living in your SharePoint? What's, where is your exposure in these systems that you're using all the time, especially now that people are working from home and they're working on, they're working on networks that are just, their home networks are garbage. They just all are. So being able to really dive in and say, okay, you have this issue with, personal information, or, I had an assessment conversation earlier this week about, hey, you've got, 60 bank accounts in this one, bank account numbers in this one repository that I was able to find, and I don't know anything about your network. So, we have a lot of conversations now about, privacy rights, and it's shifted from our healthcare data to now our personal identifiable information, our driver's license numbers, our dates of birth, all of those things. So to see companies like Barracuda stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to try to solve for this, we're going to help identify this faster, is a really good thing. But I also do believe that there is still human requirement. There still is the requirement of human intervention, because somebody has to set these systems up to work appropriately and know what they're doing, and have some procedural guidelines that they need to follow to make them work. Otherwise, it's just a tool. It's just I can go hunt for this and I can click this button and what are you doing with the information? That's the next step. That's what you need to get to.
Yeah, I was gonna add, it's a great thing to think about, because every time we talk about security on the show and we talk about security tools, and like this here, it says, oh, well, if there's a bad attachment, it'll if you say delete it, it'll delete it off. But there's so much fundamental human behavior that is what creates these security problems in the first place. Like you're saying, like now we have tools that can go out and like look for things like information that probably shouldn't be there in certain repositories, but it's still the people that put it there in the first place, right? And there's still
the people who put it there, and then the people who are in charge of removing it. And are they where are they removing it to? Why are they removing it? Is there a retention requirement for some of these things where maybe we need to put them in another system? Do they need to move from here to another place and be retained? I think about security tools like the features of my car, right? I have the automatic AC system that's going to temperature control things, and I'm going to use that pretty regularly. I'm going to use my seat warmers pretty regularly, but there's, about 150 features on my car dashboard that I can, they're showstoppers for my friends when I show them my new car. Hey, look, this does this and that does that. But, am I getting use out of it? And how am I getting, what's the practical reason for this? So that's a lot of the work that I do is around developing those procedures and those guidelines for, okay, I've just shown you this great technology and this excellent feature functionality. Now let's talk about how it's going to work. Let's talk about what you're going to do to make it work, or what I'm going to do to make it work. And then, how are we going to have accountability in the operations, just day to day with all these cool bells and whistles that we have now.
And cars do have a lot of bells and whistles. Now, what is name 3 features of your car that you've never used?
I only very recently started using my Apple CarPlay, using Siri from the steering wheel. Before that, I actually didn't even know it was there. I didn't even know what that button was for. I have one of my cars has I have the ability to drive it as a standard, but I'm not going to use that. Like, I'm not going to shift it. Right. And then I don't know. I can't think of a third, but I just know that I scroll through my little dashboard and I'm like, I don't know what half of these things do. My husband messes with the equalizers. I don't mess with the equalizers. Like the stereo is what the stereo is, but he's got to have it set to a certain parameters and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I just want to get in my car and drive,
So let me ask you another question. So name a car feature that you never thought you would ever care about, but now you can't live without.
Oh, the butt warmers and the steering wheel warmer. Yeah.
I was going to say
steering wheel warmer now. And that one is like, I'm like, oh, that's so bougie. And then it's like, oh my gosh, how did I ever live without this? I love it.
It's funny you say that because when we went to go, I never cared about a steering wheel warmer ever. And my van came with it. It was not something that I was like, I have a van because I've got kids, so I call it the Kidmazine, but it had a steering wheel warmer on it. And I never thought I would ever care about it. I've never had it before. And then I live in a very cold area. And like now I would never want to live without it. In fact, my wife got really jealous. So like we almost basically got rid of her car. It was 10 years old. It was time to
get a car that had a steering wheel.
But like her one requirement was that the new car had to have a heated steering wheel.
Yep.
Which is crazy. I was like, anti-lock brakes. Who needs those?
Yes. Keep my hands warm.
Hands.
Yeah.
And of course, if you get the heated steering wheel, of course it has butt cheek warmers on there because you gotta have a warm tushy when you're going down the road. It's super important stuff. And this has nothing to do with security other than security of your physical self and well-being, I guess. You got to
be comfortable. You got to be comfortable at work too. I mean, you got to be comfortable and safe at work, just like you do in your car. Why not have some fun too?
So might as well. So there's a lot of other things here to talk about, and I don't want to drone on too much because there's so many tools, but I do want to kind of touch on the new tool that they shipped, which is that data inspector. I don't know if I've heard of a tool like this before. Rich, is there other tools that do this kind of searching?
That's a great question. I don't know. I certainly don't feel like I've written about a bunch, but that doesn't mean this is a brand new product category.
So Angela,
they're a little more niche. So they're not, they haven't really presented themselves in the MSP market just yet. Barracuda has actually done a very good job of taking things that were, years ago were just enterprise tools that CISOs were using and then scaling them down to the MSP size. But there are data inspectors that will, that will perform the same function. I don't know what the pricing is like on Barracuda, but I would imagine it's probably, the barrier to entry is much lower than in some of the enterprise tool sets that do the same thing.
Do you think there's any potential for, privacy concerns with searching OneDrive? And obviously it should be mostly business stuff, and I would imagine in there, but
the privacy concern is more so what's already in there that you didn't know about. That's the privacy concern. I have a client that I work with that we have a lot of conversations about data leakage and some concerns there. And one of the things that we had to do was move the HR systems out of the domain, so it's there are a lot of companies that are outsourcing their HR benefits and using an application or something for people to file for insurance or, get their pay stubs and things like that. They're tied to a personal email address. So it removes the liability from the company. And I've seen cases where somebody left the company and their HR data was tied to their work email address. Well, their work email address was then forwarded to a distribution group. So COBRA paperwork was then forwarded to the distribution group of, X amount of people and stuff. So the risk, definitely it lies in what's already there that you just don't know about, much more so than the tool that's going to go try to find it. So you have some risk in the tool set too, because nothing is fully secure. But but imagine what would happen if if a sensitive file was leaked in some way, shape, or form, and most of that happens through just human error. I accidentally sent our entire client base list to bill@competitor.com instead of bill@mysalesdepartment.com or, something like that. So
boy, that would suck if somebody did that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, when we're just talking, does anybody else feel that like they kind of missed out on a good, maybe co-branded marketing opportunity if they'd named this Inspector Data, like that cartoon?
Yeah.
Na-na-na-na, Inspector Data. Da-da-da. I think it would have been a huge hit.
That would have been an attention grabber for sure.
You definitely want to entrust your data security to a cartoon character.
Well, it's not just any cartoon character. He's,
Inspector Gadget.
But this is Inspector Data. But he's still got things that comes out of his hat, right? With a big magnifying glass.
Yeah.
No one ever thinks of the marketing potential of these things. Anyway, moving on. So we've got a lot still ahead to come. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we are going to be joined by Rob Ray from Datto. We're going to talk about their 2021 annual State of the MSP report. Angela's going to join us on the other side for that. So stick around. We'll be back in just a few.
Ready to grow your business in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Tune in to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's global podcast, to hear what's next in the IT space. Industry leaders, subject matter experts, and more share their valuable insights to provide listeners with the best growth opportunities, with some interesting stories sprinkled in along the way. Listen, subscribe, and follow B2B Tech Talk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because it's time to imagine more.
For the past several years, Datto has been putting out their global State of the MSP report, surveying managed service providers to gather a wealth of data and insights on various topics, get a snapshot on how current day MSPs are operating and the solutions they use, and make some predictions on what may change in the years to come. Joining us now to talk about the recent 2021 report is Datto's Senior Vice President of Business Development, Mr. Rob Ray. Welcome, Rob.
Well, thank you. I'm super happy to be here, as always.
I'm glad to have you. I should say back. It's been a while though. The last time you were on was what, 3 years ago, 2018. It seemed like a millennia ago, all pre-COVID and all these crazy things. At that point, we were talking about the 2018 report. So it might be kind of fun as we talk through this interview to maybe kind of think back on what life was like in the before times when life was good.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot in here to dive into. Before we get to that, I want to give you an opportunity to tell everyone a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rob Ray, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Datto. And business development is kind of a unique thing. It used to be a unique thing to Datto. I like to think that we actually created at least what the form it is now. But pretty common in the vendor MSP space these days. Business development tends to be the area that's focused around the connection with the actual MSPs. Things like any type of community involvement, events, execution, trade show execution, road shows. Obviously, I own the DattoCon project, pretty much anything that engages with our partners or represents our organization face-to-face with the actual channel. So let's sum it up and put it in a big bucket called community. So I have a team of people worldwide that kind of focus on the community and moving the MSPs forward, looking for trends and trying to find ways that we can help our MSP base continue to grow their businesses.
You have a long storied history in the channel. You were at AVG at one point, and you think you started Level Platforms or were part of the Level Platforms. Give us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, that's a little twisted there. So I actually started in finance. I spent the first 12 years of my career working for a bank up in Canada. And once you get into a bank in Canada, you pretty much have job security for the rest of your life. It just doesn't pay very well. And I had a really, really smart kid that worked for me way back in the day. And I remember this kid came in and I was trying to talk him into a career in banking, but this kid literally wanted to bounce careers every 2 years because he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. So he was trying different fields out and he thought, I'm going to come to finance. But literally in the interview, he told me, I'm not going to be here for more than a year and a half. And I was convinced that I was going to make finance this kid's career. And a year and a half later, he comes to me, phenomenal track record, did a great job, and he resigns. And he says, I'm moving on to IT. And then he did. He literally joined an organization, Compact Computers, if you guys remember Compact way back in the day, which eventually was acquired by HP. And lo and behold, he called me up probably about 6 months later and goes, you have to leave finance and come to IT. It's just like IT is definitely going to be the home for me. And there's a great spot for you here. So I joined Compact back in 2000. Spent a couple years there, made it through the HP acquisition, spent a little bit of time there, left IT, went back to finance, missed IT, and was looking for a way back into the actual channel. And back then, so Compact HP was all hardware sales. And back then, at least Compact was a 100% back reseller before MSP. They were called resellers or VARs. And my job was literally to negotiate margins on things like desktops and laptops and servers and any physical hardware, because that was predominantly the sales back in the day. Double-digit margins, if you remember those days. And what happened was there was an industry trend that happened for that brief period where I left IT, where MSPs were emerging and people were starting to focus on the services revenue as opposed to the hardware revenue. So I wanted to find an area where I could narrow in my kind of like, I want to be in growth mode. I don't want to be selling stuff that people are forgetting about, or we've all been talking about the death of hardware for how long. And found a services company. And back then, Level Platforms was a good Canadian RMM company. It was right in my own backyard. I was able to jump in what I felt was kind of grassroots of where MSPs were going to start, like the foundation for a managed services offering, arguably could be an RMM technology. Level Platforms was acquired by AVG in 2013, I want to say. And then AVG sold it to Avast. Avast sold it to Barracuda. So Barracuda MSP today is the old Level Platforms project or old Level Platforms product. I'm sure they've done a ton of innovation to it since then. At least I hope they have. But that was my opportunity to take a look at a new venture, which was backup. And that's how I ended up at Datto. Was basically backup was going through a transformation. It was all about recovering data. And I remember back when I joined Datto in 2013, if you looked at all the backup companies that were out there, and there's still to this day thousands of them, the message was the same: fires, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes. And we were focused on natural disaster recovery. And a lot of that was like buying insurance. Why would you do that for the less than 1% chance your building may burn down? And even then, how valuable is your data? But then this amazing thing happened in 2016. It actually started happening just prior to that, where we started looking at why people were recovering data. And people were recovering data not because of fires and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes and bears. They were recovering data because of human deficiencies, malicious deletion, just simple mistakes. And then all of a sudden malware started getting nasty, and then ransomware came in. And now today, we don't even talk about, hurricanes and fires and tornadoes are all terrible things, but those are easy today as opposed to what's going on from a security landscape. And if you think about it, pre-2016, we weren't even talking about ransomware. And I remember the first couple mentions I brought ransomware into the conversation in 2016, because I found it and thought, this is amazing. This is going to revolutionize the managed services industry. Greatest thing since Y2K. And I went and started talking to people about it. And people are like, you're nuts. I've never heard of this before. There's no way this is a thing. And then all of a sudden, we're all talking about it all the time. And it is probably one of the greatest things that could have happened to us in the IT space.
So what was your sales strategy when you were trying to sell on fires, floods, and tornadoes and stuff? Would you walk into a meeting with a prospective customer and, have a can of gasoline and some matches and flipping a Zippo, and they say there's a 1% chance that the building's going to catch on fire, and you can sit there and be like, are you sure about that? Is that
the backup space?
Yeah. The backup space is interesting. When I joined it in 2013, and Datto was doing something or trying to do something that none of the backups were. And again, working for an RMM company, we actually had to integrate with all the different backup solutions. So I knew all the players. I knew the companies that I liked. I knew the individuals that I liked. I knew what the MSPs liked from a technology standpoint. The problem was that nobody was really separating from the pack. And it was like this big clump, and everybody's just kind of all backups the same. It's kind of the way people treat antivirus the same. It's kind of all the same. It's not a big deal. You just have to have one. It doesn't matter what flavor you pick. But Datto was trying to change the message, and they tried to change the message away from, you can recover data, like backup data, recover data. They were changing the conversation and focusing on the downtime aspect of it. So then it wasn't about whether you can recover the data. It became about the speed of the recovery. And that's the RTO, RPO. It sounds like such a silly conversation today because it is a standard conversation that every MSP has. But I'm telling you, in 2013, when I joined the organization, nobody was having this conversation. And I think all we did was we just kind of changed the conversation around, it's not about backing up, it's about the recovery. It's about the speed of the recovery. It's about the cost of downtime. And then you start factoring in the other factors around downtime and changing it away from the fires and talking about, the importance of that data, the security of that data, the speed of recovery, but then the different reasons why things are deleted, rather than saying, hey, if a hurricane ever comes through Manhattan, which has started happening recently, but what didn't happen a number of years ago, then you could at least recover very quickly, those kinds of conversations. So it was more about changing the conversation so that people valued their data a little bit more. But I think there's also the fact that as time has gone on, people are recognizing the value of technology, and not only just the value of technology, but the speed in which they want their technology. I don't know about you guys, but I've got 4 daughters. And if my internet connection flops out for about 10 seconds, I get 4 text messages within a matter of seconds. So, it's like everybody wants everything now. And I think that kind of need and necessity and reliance upon technology has just allowed this entire industry, much less Datto, just grow.
It's so true.
Rob, I've got to jump in here, though, to point out, because Matt was asking, did fire and so on factor into your sales pitch? And it did. You guys used to blow up appliances.
Okay, we did. But that was more just, it's funny. Somebody on Reddit called me the carrot top of the channel, which I'm not quite sure if I should be insulted by it or not, but I'm assuming prop comic, because that's exactly what we would do. You're right, Rich. Back in the day, in order to be able to tell everybody what it is that we did, we would take a backup right there live in front of the audience. Then we would destroy the device that we backed up. And we would do that through entertaining means: hammers, bats, fires. We would light it, catch it on fire. We'd use flash paper. But anyway, the goal was just to destroy the device. And then we would virtualize the device on a different laptop and be able to show everybody that in a matter of 60 seconds, I can get that laptop, which is now a steaming pile of garbage over there. I can get that laptop virtualized on a new one, and I can do it live in front of an entire audience, and I can do it in 60 seconds. Now, if you can do that and impress IT guys, imagine what you can do to a group of end users. And we have stopped doing it, Rich, for various reasons. We've stopped doing it people still ask for it. And for some reason, people still, I haven't done it. We called it the disaster demo. I haven't done one since like 2018, but people are still constantly looking for it or remembering that. But at the same time, it really, and we still do it for end users. Like when we're doing an an MDF event for one of our partners, where they invite us to come out and present in front of a group of end users. If you want to demonstrate how an MSP can shorten downtime, it's a perfect way to do it. And it's entertaining. I mean, who doesn't want to see a laptop being destroyed?
Somebody who wants a working laptop, maybe.
Somebody who didn't pay for the laptop.
Yeah. And we do donate technology in its place for everyone we would destroy. So we actually do make sure that we're very diligent with these things. They basically, all they can do is PowerPoint at that particular point when we destroy them.
So I have to ask. I know we got to get moved on to the report, because that's the whole reason why we're here to talk about. But I got to ask you pre-pandemic were a prolific traveler.
Yes.
You were probably I think I was reading 250,000 miles a year roughly. Are you traveling again now? How much? Do you what was that a huge shock?
Yeah, it was. So Datto and the message, and even the MSP industry is expanding globally. And Datto's been expanding very much so into Europe and very much so into the Asian marketplace. So a lot of my job is kind of being on the forefront of that. So I was doing a lot of long haul travel, international travel. And when everything got shut down, and so you're right, I was doing about 250,000 miles a year, traveling all over the world. And I loved it, just loved it, because you see these emerging markets where they're trying to figure out the managed services space, and they're trying to figure out owning the stack and not allowing end users to pick what technology's in the stack. And it was such a great and awesome experience. And then I was in Mexico in March of 2020, and I was coming home, or was actually coming to JFK, which is my home airport, but to catch a connector to Sweden, because I was going to Stockholm to start a European roadshow series. And if you remember, Sweden was one of the first countries that shut down. And my flight literally got canceled as I was sitting at the airport. So I went home. And if you remember, everybody's like, 14 days, we're going to flatten the curve, and then everything will be normal. And I remember thinking, what the hell am I going to do for 14 days? Like 14 days for me was a lifetime. And I started this little countdown. This is now a countdown to DattoCon, but it was a count up for the 14 days, right? And then we hit day 400 and realized that this is not going to end anytime soon. So for me, it was a little bit of a shock. But you know what? The virtual world became insane. Absolutely insane, because then people that couldn't even afford to have a show before are now having online shows. And they're having more events, because now all of a sudden they've got a captive audience and everybody's sitting at home and looking for things to do. So they're going to webinars and they're learning more than ever before. The webinar attendance went from like, we'd be lucky to get a couple of hundred to a webinar to getting thousands. So then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe this is the new way we're going to do business. At which point then everybody realized after a few of these things, we hate it, and we're not going to go back to that. And so live events are starting to happen again. I've been traveling pretty much nonstop since April. It's been domestically around the United States, which I'm not complaining about, because I love this market, and I love getting into the smaller markets with like ChannelPro and events like that, so that I can get into these smaller markets and talk to those MSPs that I haven't seen in a few years. So for me, I actually really, really love it. Hoping the international stuff opens back up again in 22, but we'll see. We'll see. Well,
that's a really good segue actually to dive into the report, because you're talking to MSPs and learning about what they're all about and what they need, and that's what this report is kind of about. So if you could take a minute or two and just kind of, what is the global state of the MSP report? What's the goal behind it?
So the reason why we do this report, I mean, first of all, Datto is one of arguably the largest MSP only vendor in the world. Okay, arguably. We design technology, we think about technology, we come to market with technology, we innovate technology with the MSP in mind, and adding to the MSP stack so they can go and direct it to their end users. As a result, we have a pretty captive or pretty narrow audience of just managed service providers. And one of the things that we wanted to do was start getting data points from them, just find out what is like, so that we can compare what maybe some MSPs are thinking about and validate that, yeah, thousands of other MSPs are thinking the same thing. So it started out as, a few few different types of questions, and then it's kind of expanded upon there. But one of the things we've been able to do over the years is get a lot of benchmark data so we can compare previous years and whatnot. So that's part of the reason why we started the report. And again, just to make it something that the channel can digest, something we can benchmark to say, here's where we were last year, here's where we are now. We talk about vision, where do MSPs see their businesses going? What was in their stock this year that wasn't in their stock last year? What are they seeing more revenue at? Those kinds of things. And I think one of the things about this year's report, which is kind of very interesting, is we're finally starting to get some pandemic type data. So we can actually go back and take a look at what actually happened. Because there were a lot of us were speculating and forecasting. Coming into 2020, there was a massive amount of optimism. The pandemic changed all that because nobody was predicting that we'd all be sitting at home for 400 days worldwide. So nobody predicted that. So how did that have an impact on the MSP space or have an impact on technology? We all tend to doomsday things and think that this is going to be the worst thing ever because, I don't know, just human nature. That's the easy route to take, is that this is all going to suck and everything's going to go sideways. But that actually wasn't the case.
Yeah, well, in fact, that was sort of interesting to me. So there's some revenue data in the report, as you would expect. 47% of the MSPs you surveyed said that they saw a slight increase in revenue. 36% reported no change. So right off the bat, you know that this was not a disastrous year, as a lot of people were predicting. What's a little bit interesting about that data to me is that anecdotally and in conversations with people like Paul Dipple, what I've heard a lot is that the MSPs who are best in class, the MSPs who really know what they're doing, had a phenomenal year last year and are having a phenomenal year this year. And the people who were maybe struggling a little bit last year had a terrible 2020 and are, still trying to recover this year. So, I mean, it almost felt like there were more extremes in those business results than the data here would suggest. I mean, how does that kind of square with what you hear from the MSPs you're talking to every week?
That's exactly it. And for me, and of course, some of this is going to be anecdotal because I was around in 2008 in the managed services space when we had the Great Recession here in the United States, right? The housing crisis. There were MSPs going out of business. Like every day I was getting another phone call from another MSP that was just literally game over. I'm going out of business. It's not the case these days. And I think there's a couple of things that factor into that, Rich. And I think it goes back to, if you're talking to Paul Dipple, his entire model is about business maturity. And I think what's happened over the years, if you look at, if anything, if we want a little bit of a history lesson here, 2008, I think was a real, we were preaching managed services. We were preaching recurring revenue. We're trying to get everybody on board for this movement, right? Getting everybody to move from reseller to MSP. And those were early days. If anything, what happened in the US market, and I think this is why the US market, no offense to any of your international viewers, but I would argue that the US market is ahead of every other market when it comes to managed services, managed services delivery and IT delivery in the SMB region. The reason why I say that is because I think that 2008 recession, which impacted the US more than any other market, was so devastating that it really forced everybody to become an MSP. It forced people to look for recurring revenue and contract type revenue, because what happens in recessions is everybody just holds on to cash. They don't want to spend a dime because they need to make it through this piece. So large projects, which a lot of resellers depended on, were gone. And we saw that in the early days of the pandemic. However, if you look at the amount of recurring revenue that these organizations, managed services providers, have today, there's more recurring revenue that they've got than there is one-time project revenue. So even if the project revenue gets parked, which it did, it got parked, but it ultimately came back. It wasn't like 2008 where it got parked and disappeared. People started extending the life of their materials because they didn't have the budget or were scared to spend money back then. What happened here was that recurring revenue piece, those little bites of technology or bills for technology that end users were taking, they didn't stop. They did stop and slow down some of the larger projects. But again, those came back relatively quickly when we saw that this wasn't going to spin us into a really bad type recession. So I think there's a combination of the recurring revenue piece of it. But I think also, if you think about 2021 versus over just even 5 years ago, our reliance upon technology to exist as businesses, digital transformation, marketplaces, the amount of business that's being done online versus even 5 years ago. I went back and reread the Walmart effect recently. And if you remember the Walmart effect, we were talking about Walmart coming in and putting smaller mom and pop shops out of business. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? But now Walmart's complaining about Amazon coming in and trying to put them out of business. It's amazing how things have changed in such a short period of time that the same thing goes with actual technology. The reliance upon technology, the need for technology has become so high that when something like this happens, the technology is the last thing that people are going to stop. I'll give you myself as a perfect example. Okay. As a like real personal example, a lot of people took advantage of this opportunity to reduce the amount of their bills. Okay. It was a great opportunity to call the vendors that you work with personally and professionally and say, hey, is there any way we can work out in some way to reduce our bills? So my wife decides she wants to take a look at our internet and cable bill, which she's wanted to do it for a long time anyway, but she decides that now is the opportunity to do that. She calls our internet provider and says, hey, I want to reduce my bill. Internet provider goes, no problem. We can throttle you back. That will reduce your bill. She doesn't know what that means. So she's like, sure. All of a sudden, remember, 4 kids and myself on Zoom calls, and nobody can get connected to the internet. And all of a sudden, it was within a matter of seconds. She hadn't even hung up with the internet company before we felt the pain of our technology and being throttled back, to the point where not only did she put it back, but she bought an upgraded program because we all knew we were going to be at home for a while. So we actually ended up spending more from that phone call than we actually did the less, because what happens is in technology, you start paying less, you start feeling more pain. Nobody wants pain, so they're going to do that. Instead, you're going to find they're going to reduce their budgets in other places. And I think the MSPs got the benefit of that.
That gets to something that I kind of wanted to bring up. And there's some data in the report that hints at this, but what I have in mind is more a conversation that we had a few months ago. So in the report, it says 93% of the MSPs you surveyed said now is a good time to be an MSP. 96% expect their revenue to increase, which speaks to a kind of financial confidence. But a few months back, you were at one of our conferences, and we were kind of talking about the fact that a lot of MSPs went into 2020 figuring, I provide a useful service, people pay me a fair amount of money for that. And then everything shuts down. Everything is dependent entirely on IT. And all of a sudden, MSPs discover that, no exaggeration, they really are critical infrastructure employees, that they play an absolutely critical role in the global economy and just life day to day for people. And that there is a kind of self-confidence that comes out of that, basically, that MSPs sort of appreciate the importance and value of what they do today in a way that they didn't 2 years ago. So, talk a little bit more about how you have seen that maybe manifest itself out among MSPs, but also what do you think that's going to mean for MSPs, moving forward?
Oh, this is a great one, Rich. And you're absolutely right. I love that number. 93% of MSPs think it's a great time to be an MSP. Like,
I agree with that.
You couldn't get 93% of MSPs to agree that it's a great time to be alive. Forget about being an MSP, right? We're cynical creatures in the IT space. I'm the most cynical person ever. We default towards the sky is falling all the time. So for me, that's a magnificent number that I'm like so happy about, because we all agree that this is and this is in the middle of a pandemic, right? With some of the highest depression rates amongst mankind ever, and we're all saying that this is a great time to be here. So I think this leads to a couple of different things. I think and it's funny because one of the conversations I was having pre-pandemic, like literally when the presentations that I was doing to MSPs, we were talking about retention strategies. Because if you think about the relationship between an MSP and an end user, if technology is working and everything is working just fine, you should never see your IT guy, right? Because everything is just working. You're paying a per month fee. So what happened was a lot of end users were questioning the value of their MSP because they never saw their MSP. And there's a lot of MSPs that will admittedly sent a tech over to their end user's office, not because work needed to be done at that end user office, but just because they needed some level of face time so that the end user understood what they were paying for. And that's kind of a ridiculous notion, but that's kind of the human element. If I don't see you, you must not be working. So what happened was we were talking about this and retention strategies and how you send reports out and make sure everybody understands what they're paying for. Then pandemic hits. And all of a sudden, everybody calls their MSP first. Like literally, they call their MSP first because they need to figure out the work from home strategy. They need to figure out where's more technology. How do I get more bandwidth? What do I do with the stuff in the office? How do I secure this stuff? Now, all of a sudden, ransomware has become an even bigger epidemic than it was before. So all of a sudden, the value of what the MSP is doing became not only understood, but valued more than it was even in December of 2019. So that, I hate the expression, but that trusted advisor status just went into like full throttle, where everybody now gets it. Everybody now understands it and wants to actually like looks to their MSP for more help. It's accelerated things like cloud adoption. It's accelerated digital transformation. It's accelerated just SMB's reliance upon IT, but also the service and the value that they're getting out of their IT more so than ever before. And security is still very scary, and the world is getting scarier. Cloud is still very misunderstood by a lot of people. And this is where the MSP kind of in the dark and is the best person to do this. So I think there's a couple different side effects from this. Number one is, retention rates are going up. Nobody would leave an MSP today to go back to in-house IT. The whole value out of outsourcing IT and saving money, because an MSP can always do it better than an in-house IT person and usually cheaper. So the whole idea is that if I want to save money, why wouldn't you outsource your IT? There's another side effect there, which is the reliance upon IT is higher. The digital transformation's been accelerated. The cloud adoption's been accelerated. The MSP is the one that's positioned to do that. So there's more business coming to the MSP as a result. And then finally, and probably one of the bigger ones is, and we've been talking about this for a while, is MSPs slowly starting to go up market. Larger organizations are finding the managed services channel because they are not getting the same level of service or security that an in-house IT team would provide that an MSP does provide. We talk about it as SMBs are constantly looking for security, education, and where to invest their money. Mid-market, large market are exactly the same. So this whole notion of MSPs being pigeonholed to the SMB market, I think you're going to see is going to get challenged. And I think that's where it's going to create even better opportunity for all of us as time goes on.
Yeah, Angela, it looks like you were trying to jump in.
I would entirely agree. But I think that, I know for me, one of the biggest takeaways, so, going from the IT consulting world, going from the cloud world into the IT consulting world, back into MSP from security advisory, the last 12 months has taught MSPs a lot about relationship management and that stature as you said, as the trusted advisor. Because I know just for myself and the companies that I've been working with, people, they want to know what they don't know. So they're going to the experts. So I've seen a lot of like soft skill training on the IT side where it's, before it was the technicians that were just kind of fixing the problems have now become the consultants, advising on workarounds and new solutions and bringing more revenue opportunity into their end user clients. And that has been one of the biggest, most significant upticks that I've seen. And a good impetus for that growth into bigger markets, because people really understand that, an MSP, we're not just tech shops. We are experts at what we do, and we're here to help. So the companies that I've seen that are leveraging things like customer satisfaction surveys or net promoter scores or things like that, they're starting to introduce these new metrics into relationship management that is definitely moving the needle and bringing improvement to the MSPs that are investing in those types of resources. Absolutely
perfect example was way back at the beginning of this. And if you guys have teenagers, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But back at the beginning of this, you have executives and workers from all over, like up and down organizations that are taking and now all of a sudden utilizing their home networks that probably they themselves have built.
Yep.
We started talking about MSPs getting into you need to go secure everywhere that your end users work, including their home environments. And MSPs went, it's not enough money there. Nobody wants to spend money at home. Now, all of a sudden, they're all sitting at their Best Buy built networks. And now all of a sudden, their kids are TikToking on the same access point that they're running their businesses on. And if you guys remember, this stuff started coming out about TikTok and saying, like, is this a safe application to be running at your business at the same time your children are doing that and you're running your business off of this? Where are you sharing data? Who's has access to this? And the end user is not going to have any answers for that. Who do they return to? They can turn to their MSP who can answer questions such as that. I mean, it's such a ridiculous thing, but again, the world is a way scarier place than it used to be from a security perspective, from an application perspective, and all that stuff. That's just kind of that peace of mind that MSPs do a lot of that consulting on and be able to just pick up the phone and go, you don't need to worry. The future of this is that work from anywhere type movement where, whether you believe we're all going to go back to normal and working in our offices, whether you believe that we're going to stay remote, whether COVID-19, gamma virus strain comes out and all of a sudden we're all locked back down again, God forbid. But if this happens, the MSP messaging is very simple. So what? We got you covered. Because guess what? We've got you off the same access points that your kids are TikToking on or whatever they're going to be doing in the next few months. We're going to move this into a more secure environment. We've got this better technology. You've got more monitors, better connectivity, better speed, better security, all the things that you need. And we're going to be able to do it whether you work from home, whether you work from the beach, whether you work from the cabin, whether you work from the office. And it's a massive opportunity for the MSPs. Not only that, but for us, like as a vendor, which means also for the MSP, it multiplies the amount of licenses that they have, the amount of the devices that they have under management. Ultimately, the user becomes multi-device reliant as opposed to just carrying one laptop or working on one laptop or one device kind of thing.
So while we've got you, Rob, I want to talk about cloud a little bit here because unbeknownst to you, though I'm sure this won't surprise you, earlier in the show, we spoke a little bit about the launch of Datto's Azure Continuity product in the English-speaking world this week, which is your first cloud infrastructure backup system. There were some really interesting cloud numbers in the State of the MSP report, some of which are more surprising than others. So 93% of the people you surveyed are offering office productivity software like Microsoft 365. 88% are doing BDR. You would expect those numbers to be that high. 97% of the people you surveyed are doing cloud-based infrastructure design and management, which kind of blew me away. That's a bigger number than the Microsoft 365 number. But I mean, it points to the degree to which cloud is now, not just something that MSPs do, but increasingly a primary part of what they do. So, I mean, talk a little bit about that trend, about the rising importance of cloud management versus endpoint management, and how that kind of figures into what Datto is doing now and in the years going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, remember, keep in mind that cloud is such a vague term. It can be interpreted in a million different ways. In essence, it's anything that's not sitting on-prem in a lot of our world. So, kind of take that with a grain of salt because the MSPs, even back in the reseller days, were dealing with cloud technology. We just didn't call it cloud. I think it was finally Microsoft that defined it as cloud. And that's when we all started going, oh, this is new, wonderful thing. When really it's been around for about 40 some odd years, right? So all these technologies are definitely migrating towards that. I think when you start looking at the virtual world and this whole digital transformation, cloud is an important aspect of it. So for MSPs, it's super important that they can have this conversation. And that goes back to a comment that I made before where technology is more complicated than it's ever been before. Forget about security for a quick sec. It used to be relatively simple where you could go and plug a desktop into a server to the wall and you've got, kind of technology and it's working. The threat landscape has changed. The whole way in which and what you're using on these different devices has changed. So cloud has become such an integral part of it, but it's still something that is very, very misunderstood with the typical end users, which is why, cloud and marketing around the cloud and talking about cloud services and those adoption numbers and saying, yeah, we can do anything you want from a cloud perspective is so important in the MSP space because it takes complex and makes it real simple from, I don't need to worry about what this means because my MSP is going to take care of it and is going to kind of make sure that I am of where I'm supposed to be from that cloud migration, that cloud adoption perspective. So that's kind of, I think, where those numbers are coming from, Rich. But there's definitely this continued shift towards the cloud. There's in some markets, we've seen it a lot faster than other markets. Like for example, the ANZ region, Australia, their cloud adoption rates are significantly faster than what we've seen in some other markets. And that usually is just because of adoption, connectivity, speed, those kinds of things have been available to that market. Whereas in the US market, we've had the luxury of MSPs and actual good hardware, and in some cases, some poor connectivity, which has kind of slowed that adoption down. But now at this moment, this is an opportunity for all organizations to kind of relook at their strategy. I've got a perfect example. I got a buddy of mine runs a very successful business, only a handful of employees, but he's making some good money here in Connecticut. Pandemic, he's moved out of his office, but he had a server rack in his office. Everything that he had in that rack could be in the cloud. And this office, they don't plan on going back to this office because they're, from a productivity perspective, they've actually been fine. They haven't lost any business. They don't feel a need to go back to the office. So bricks and mortar is disappearing. And now he's like, what do I do with this rack? Do I bring this rack home and put it in my own closet in my own house? Nobody wants that. So now this is where he's accelerating cloud and accelerating his cloud conversations because he just wants to get rid of it, even if it means paying some extra bucks to do it, because he's got to go put it somewhere. And I think what you'll find is if you dig in a little bit, especially, I was going to say, especially here in the US market, but I'm seeing it everywhere. It's those types of conversations that people are having.
Interesting. So the last part of that I think we have time to talk about is there's a section here that talks about what's keeping MSPs up at night. And, the top three of those, there's like profitability, revenue growth. Number one surprised me a little bit, which is competition. Historically, that hasn't really been much of an issue in the channel. What do you think of that, Rob?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you're right. That hasn't shown up on any report before. So I don't know if something changed, if something was going on at the time when we actually asked the question. Now, remember, competition for the MSP comes in many different flavors. I don't think it's necessarily just other MSPs. But remember, MSPs, anybody that's going to take or try to take business away from an MSP would be considered a competitor. And I would tag vendors in that space as well. There's a lot of vendors that are bad actors. That's maybe a bad term to use for them. But there's a lot of channel vendors in this space that do sell direct to end users. And they do continually try to take business away from the channel as a result. That's where maybe some of that comes in, especially when you're talking about cloud. And because the whole idea behind cloud is it's cheap, it's easy, let's go and buy just directly from here. Whereas ultimately what we are finding long-term is the MSP adds significant value in a lot of these cloud services, cloud adoption, even assessing what are the right cloud directions and movement they should make. So I think that might be where that's coming from. I think the other part of this too is it is very competitive. And then all of a sudden, everybody needs technology, and all of a sudden they're calling everybody that they possibly can off of Google to try to figure out how they can find. Interesting conversation I had last week in New Jersey at an event. We offer networking gear, and somebody says, what's the lifetime or what's the lag time on getting a switch? And we're running into the same issue that every other vendor is running into with the supply chain being so far behind because of COVID. So what happens is you think about end users, they're saying, well, I'm 18 months on a switch. Are you kidding me? So they start calling other MSPs, and seeing if their timeline's different. The good news is that we're all suffering from the same.
Everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like you can just call somebody else and get somebody's got a whole million servers sitting around ready to go. So that's I think maybe parts of where that competition's coming from. But no shock that the next three are revenue generation, sales and marketing, profitability. Like those are the things that have kind of defined the MSP space. And you look at MSPs. Traditionally, we come from technology backgrounds. Technology people aren't necessarily good at sales and marketing. It's very rare when you find somebody that both can configure a server and is a great sales and marketing person. So from that perspective, I think that's where the strength of the MSP channel has always been the technical knowledge that they actually have. Where they win is the fact that people need that knowledge. The rub is where the in between is we try to get that knowledge packaged up and sent over so that somebody understands the value of it and pays for it. And that continues to be one of the top struggles. If you kind of put the next three on the list together, continues to be one of the top struggles. There's good news, I think, on the horizon. Number one is, all of us have been trying to figure this out. When I say all of us vendors. So yeah, we're a backup disaster recovery company with an RMM tool and a PSA tool and networking gear and office backup and all that. But a lot of what we do isn't just technology innovation. It's how do you go to market with it? What objections are you going to get? How do you overcome those objections? We spend so much time and energy around helping MSPs sell more stuff, and not just our stuff, but their stuff and the services that they sell. Because and you'll see even our competitors are doing the same thing. A ton of energy is going into helping MSPs be better sales and marketing organizations, because the technology they've got cold. They're never going to, I am never going to know more about technology than my actual partner is. Even though I work for this company, I'm never going to know more about Datto than my MSPs will. What I do know is how to sell and market it, and I know how to make money with it. So if I can get that information out to them, then we can actually go and make that money together. And again, our competitors are doing it. And I think the second part that's kind of a real, really good piece is, and I'm starting to see better sales and marketing training that's coming up from not only from the vendors in this marketplace, but also from some third parties. A lot of consulting companies are coming in, like really professional stuff. Not the, I used to be an MSP and I can turn you into a millionaire crap. It's literally people that are like really good at this and being able to do sales type training and strategy and marketing type training and strategy to be able to help MSPs. And there's more and more better information that's starting to come down, as opposed to the initial, hey, I see a weakness, I'm going to exploit it. This is like literally, you guys see it through M&A, through private equity companies and venture capitalists. Billions of dollars is coming into this space. It's not long before the real pros understand this space and are going to be coming in here and trying to help everybody really nail down this managed services story. And we're starting to see that.
Yeah, very cool. There's some other stuff on the list here too about what's keeping MSPs up at night too, like work-life balance. I know we're all kind of struggling with that. You know what surprised me that wasn't on the list though? The neighbor's barking dog. That keeps me up at night.
To say the landscaping day, there's this kid across the street. He's got a Vespa with a broken motor, and he works at the Amazon factory down the street, graveyard shift. So it's like 10 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning every single day. That's what keeps me up at night.
See, I'm the guy with the barking dog, and I'm the guy with the super loud muscle car, and I'm the guy that the neighbors complain about. So all you got to do is just make sure you're the obnoxious, annoying one, then you can sleep really well at night.
So was Rob Ray a choice on the things that are keeping MSPs up at night? Because I wonder how many people would have picked that one.
I know my neighbors would put it on the list. But.
What's keeping you up? Rob Ray is. I love it. Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. There is a lot in this report, folks, that you should go and check out. I know you can get it. It's available on channelpronetwork.com. I'm sure it's also available on the Datto website. So go to the show notes and we'll put some links there where you can go and get this. But go look through it, kind of get a snapshot of what's going on. Rob, if people want to learn more about Datto or get in touch with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
Datto.com obviously is the best place to go to. And then, as you mentioned, you can get that report. It's the MSP State of MSP report. And again, it's something that we've done every single year. So you can even go back and take a look at it. We do a pretty good job of benchmarking. And then my contact info, just rob@datto.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully we'll get you back next year when the 2022 report comes out, which might be hopefully filled with more good news, because we all need good news.
Oh, absolutely. Let's hope so.
Hope so.
I imagine it will be. So I look forward to that.
Cross your fingers, folks. And with that, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, Angela Hogaboom will be on with us on the other side for a little bit of post-show fun and some regular features that we tend to do at the end of the show. You won't want to miss it. Stick around. We'll be right back. And we are back with part 3 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. Rich, for those who stuck through the interview there, a fascinating interview with Rob Ray. It certainly went a little longer than we probably expected, but gosh, it's just he's so insightful, and he's just been in this so long. He sees a much bigger picture, and of course, being at Datto and being aligned with so many partners, you're just going to have insights that no one else like him could possibly have. At least that's some of the takeaways that I came away with that from that interview. Rich, what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was a good sized conversation, but actually, we really just kind of scratched the surface of what is in that report. I mean, there were all sorts of other nuggets, and Rob at one point kind of touched on the fact that there is some evidence in the report showing the increased maturity of the managed services market and MSPs, and that if we had more time, if we could have monopolized Rob's time even further, we could have gotten into that, among other things.
Among many other things. And that, folks, I mentioned it before we cut to the break, but that there is a lot in that report that everybody should go and check out. Angela, thanks for sticking around through the interview with us and coming out on the other side. Well, any particular highlights for you? Anything that stood out to you as particularly interesting?
What I loved about it is that I can actually think back to a lot of his stories and the time frame, kind of just in the technology arena, and I remember a lot of those things. I remember the beating up of the Datto server, right, or the devices, right, and the restores. And then, a lot of the current stats that he shared are things that I've definitely witnessed over the last year. So the report is a really good read. I read it ahead of time, but his insights are awesome because he is just, he's been there, seen it all, done it all. And he has a lot of knowledge and wisdom behind all of it too. So it was a really, really great and insightful session.
Yeah, they do a really good job, even as you pointed out in the report, of kind of making it digestible. Because I can imagine the amount of data they have. That could have been probably a 300-page dissertation with more charts than you can possibly imagine. But they really do kind of distill it down into kind of the core nuggets, which is pretty cool. So definitely everyone to go check that out. It's good stuff. Rich is going to tell us what we missed and what we might see coming up down the road. But first, we want to play have a little bit of fun with Angela while we're here on the other side of the break. Last week we kind of started a new game that we called "What Would You Do?" We 5 questions. We'll still be around. We'll still do that game, of course. Everybody likes that one. But we like new, bright, shiny objects, so we just can't help ourselves of going to the new game first. So Angela, we want to play a little game with you. It's called "What Would You Do?" The way it works is Rich and I will kind of come up with a scenario, and we will ask you what you would do.
Okay. No pressure.
No pressure at all. So, Rich, first one to you.
Well, and this is something that, if I wake up in the middle of the night and I just can't fall back, this is the kind of thing that I actually think about now and again. Maybe everybody does. But, the alert goes off on your phone and there's a tornado approaching and you've got to get out of there. And you can only carry with you what will fit in a backpack. What do you grab? You've got just a couple of minutes, grab a few things and go. What do you grab?
Oh, I'm grabbing my purse and I'm shoving my phone in it and I'm out the door. Everything else is insured.
The charger, though. Don't forget the charger.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, I'm going to have to drive my car because my car has a charger in it.
All right. I'll do the second scenario. So, let's see. We talked a little about cars earlier. So you're at the car dealership and you're looking between 2 different cars. Now, one has butt warmers, the other does not. Okay. But the dealer says, if you take the one without butt warmers, it will be I'll give it to you, the car for $10,000 less. Now, you like butt warmers. What do you do?
I'm still going with the butt warmers.
You'll spend $10,000 for butt warmers?
Yes, because I know me and I will sell the car for more than I should sell it for before I have a problem. And then, when the butt warmers go out, let's go buy another one.
All right.
I have a few luxuries in my life and the automobiles are, I have standards. I have standards there.
I love it. All right. Rich, scenario number 3 to you.
And this is partly inspired. I can't remember when we had this conversation, but once upon a time, I remember you were talking about how a holiday meal that you had cooked, and you were very pleased because you actually got to use all of the appliances.
All my kitchen gadgets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the air fryer and the pressure cooker. Yeah, there was actually a use for all these things. So you do some cooking. So here is the scenario. You're just home from work. You get a call from your husband. He's bringing a client. Like somebody is joining you for dinner, and you've got to just with what you have in the cupboard, you got to make a nice meal. What do you make?
With what I've got I don't have a lot in the cupboards. That's a problem. It's definitely going to have to be a pasta dish, or you know what? Chicken wings and a veggie tray or whatever. I can do small plates really easily. So I always have the things to do the small plates. But like when it comes to a full dinner, I'm ordering out.
And for the record, if I ever face that challenge, everybody will be eating white rice and Cocoa Puffs.
You mix those together? How do you serve that?
Sprinkle them on top.
Is that,
oh my gosh.
is that Asian or Indian inspired?
Push them up and sprinkle them on top.
All right, here's a scenario for you. You are using Barracuda's new, I'm going to call it Inspector Data tool because I think that's more fun. And you're scanning a customer's environment, and you come across a very, very personal photograph that guaranteed no one was supposed to see. In fact, this photograph could potentially get that person in a lot of trouble. What do you do?
That's a tough one. I'm definitely deleting the photo and sanctioning the employee with private conversation. Because it would really highly depend on the nature of the photo. Because is this a compromising photo that's taking place in the office or in a personal scenario? Those are decisions that have to be made, but none of that should be living in a work environment anyway. So that one is actually a really hard one.
So you delete it, you get rid of the evidence, but
I'm getting rid of it if I can. Yeah, I'm getting rid of it. Like if we're talking one photo, one employee, we're not talking a file full of photos or something like that, but I am having a conversation with that employee. And then sanction wise that's entirely policy. That's, I'm going the route of what do we do, not what do I do when it comes to the disciplinary action.
All right. So she's not forwarding it on to 100 colleagues.
Oh, no.
Good stuff. All right. Some interesting insights there. Some fun stuff. Rich, I think we're going to go ahead and switch gears. Thanks for playing, by the way. That's a game we're still kind of refining and honing. So we'll get maybe next time we have you on, we'll do the 5 questions thing and be a little more, I don't know, just do something different.
Yeah.
So, Rich, why don't you grab your big, huge, psychic seer hat and your crystal ball and look inside and tell us what we might have missed last week and what might be coming up in the future.
Well, in terms of what you've missed, the best place to catch up on that every Friday on channelpronetwork.com is our In Case You Missed It post. This week, James Gaskin, who writes that for us, is going to be catching you up on the new iPhones and iPads from Apple. Speaking of SASE, we've spoken about SASE solutions a bunch on this show. Palo Alto introduced one this week. You can read a little bit more about that in case you missed it. And also the new Guinness Book of World Records is out, and James is going to review some highlights from that for you. Coming up next week, HP is doing its annual reInvent event. It will be virtual this year, as it was last year. And the next ASCII Group IT Success Summit event takes place next week for folks in the New York and New Jersey area.
Very, very cool stuff. Well, I wanted to give a big, big thank you to Angela Hogaboom, the Director of Assessment Services at RSI, for joining us here on the show once again. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, guys.
I hope, and hopefully we'll get you back down the road.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about you, get in touch with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
Search my name on LinkedIn. It's the easiest and fastest. Other than that, I'm at the Cloud Chick on Twitter.
Ooh, that's a pretty cool handle. When did you have to secure that one?
Oh, that was a long time ago. That was I feel like I've told this story before, but that was the result of a couple glasses of wine and some curiosity and GoDaddy sitting in front of me. I got really lucky. I got really lucky. I got the domain and the Twitter handle.
Oh, wow.
Very, very cool. Well, that's a good one. Hold on to that. You'll be able to resell that one someday. I am very sure, for lots and lots of money.
Oh yeah.
So awesome stuff. Angela Hogaboom, thanks again for being on. With that, I'm going to tell you a couple things everybody's got to know and what you need to do. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button. That's important because you got to hit the like button so that way you let other people know you liked it, because everybody wants to know what you think. And if you hit like, everyone's going to know. Don't you see how social media works in terms of YouTube now? Hit the like button, and if you can, also leave a little comment down below and let us know what you think, or have any cool scenarios you want us to give to folks who play that particular game, or any other thoughts. We want to hear them. So make sure you hit that like button, and of course, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications. For our audio listeners, you know what? A good rating at your podcast place of choice can go a long way. So go make sure you give us a nice rating there and leave comment if you can. And hey, you know what? If you work in the channel, you are an MSP, you've got colleagues, tell them about ChannelPro Weekly. Like, don't keep it all to yourself. It's not fair. You shouldn't be the only one that enjoys this fine program. You should let everyone else know so you have something else to talk about. So make sure you tell them, and of course, to subscribe to ChannelPro Weekly everywhere you're at. ChannelProNetwork.com is the website. Go there each and every day for white papers, news articles, resources, all kinds of good stuff that's going to help you make more money, make your business better, keep you on top of what is going on. You will be better for it, I promise. Make sure you do that. Follow us on all the socials so you know what's going on there. And we will see you all in a milestone episode, Rich. Episode number 200. Now there is an event next week. Are we doing episode 200 next week, or are we doing 200 the week after?
I believe we're doing 200 next week because we have a conference coming up, but that's in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was thinking that the Fine Biometrics event, which folks, if you do anything in biometrics, this is a pretty cool. Tell people about this particular event. It's an online event.
Actually, you've worked more on this than I have, but we have a sister publication called Fine Biometrics. They're 100% dedicated to the biometrics market. Face ID, fingerprint recognition, and password alternatives, et cetera. They have begun doing online conferences this year, just as ChannelPro has been doing for a long time. This is the second one that they have done. Unfortunately, I can't remember what the theme or the focus of it is, but they did a tremendous job on that first event. So if you're curious about a market that maybe you're dabbling in or thinking about dabbling in, this is a great use of your time, actually, to learn a little bit more about what's going on. And biometrics is one of those areas. It's a little bit like IoT and artificial intelligence. You're aware of it now. You're hearing about it. There's going to be a lot more of it in your life coming up. So it's a good time to be educating yourself about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one has a focus on enterprise biometrics, making the digital transformation work for you. Lots of good stuff. I encourage folks to go check it out, register. You can find information. Where you find information for our events too, events.channelpronetwork.com. You'll get everything you need to know there and a link to register. Go and check it out. I think everybody will get a lot out of it. Very, very cool stuff. And of course, Rich, episode 200, milestone episode. Anything that we should look forward to next week?
Well, just that we are turning the tables a little bit. So for a long time now, Matt and I have been playing 5 questions with guest hosts and asking them 5 questions. On episode 200, we are going to have some of our former hosts ask us questions. And so we're going to be on the line here having to come up with answers.
That sounds scary. But it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, folks. You're not going to want to miss it. Episode number 200. Next week it will be. So we will see everybody then. Until then, take care.